Hello, fellow free will enthusiasts. Boy, have I got the story for you. Mother Nature and Father Time have a child, free will. He was carefully constructed to appear as part of the family, so he was never really a part of the family. It was just an illusion. An illusion to make you feel like you're in control over Father Time. Free will grew up wanting to become a writer. We'll come back to this later. Okay, so then what is free will? The classic example is coming to a crossroad, where choosing either direction brings on a certain reality. Free will means that you have a free choice, and that choice determines the future. In actuality though, does any agent actually have free will? Or is free will just going to choose whichever path leads him to publishing? But then also, who got to decide free will's goal of becoming a writer? See, this leads us to goal alignment in our biological system. One argument for free will is that we aren't bound by our biology. Sex, for example, is something that has a large influence in our behaviors, and for good reason. Evolution, or our silly Mother Nature, cares deeply about making sure life is spreading their DNA. But humans are unique in that we can deviate from our nature, so we can make the choice never to procreate, going completely against our biology's goal. But you're still likely to make decisions that bring your goals to fruition. The goal may deviate from our biology, but it still isn't ourselves who are setting the goals. Let's take, for example, death, something that would go completely against our natural instincts to survive. Usually suicide is a means to end pain and suffering, but where did the suffering come from? Maybe it's depression, maybe it's a bad breakup or being fired from your job. None of those came from yourself, right? Well, you could say depression is because of yourself. It's your depression, but is it really your depression? Well, it's a biological emotion. Sadness, happiness, they're both programmed into our brain. To seek happiness is to seek one of many biological states of being. It might appear that we have free will based on the principle that we're presented multiple choices, and we're free from our biology to make a decision. But who gets to decide what the goal is? It's the nature versus nurture argument. It partially goes back to our biology, but we can stray from that. So it also includes the situation we're in. For example, we were raised as kids to have certain values, goals, and desires. Whatever they are, oftentimes they're dictated by things out of our control. If any external influence acts on our choice, would that mean we have free will? There's another layer to this as well. Even if you were isolated from every external influence over your decisions, it doesn't change the fact that the very decisions you're presented with aren't controlled by yourself. What inside of you picks what decisions are presented to you? Back to the road example. Why did you choose either left or right? Why were those decisions presented to you? If I say, hey, you can vote for anybody you want, while also only presenting two people to vote for, is that really free choice? Because that's what's happening in our brain. There's a sense that we can vote for anybody, but then our brain not only presents a few choices, but also decides what those choices are. You can try by deep thinking to maximize the amount of choices your brain presents you, but it's still out of your control exactly what decisions are presented. I think this is where the question of free will gets confusing. It becomes tied to our sense of self. You can always divert the control you feel you have to something out of your control, but it feels like we're in control of our thoughts, of our choices, and so it feels like we have free will. As Sam Harris puts it, the type of free will people think they have is where we make a decision we end up regretting and we think, man, I really shouldn't have done that. We view it as though even if we were in the exact same position, that we could have chosen differently. But let's rewind time. Actually put you in the same situation. Would you make a different decision? No, you wouldn't. The reason you end up feeling regret was because new information was revealed to you after you made the decision. But if you remove the new information, you'd make the same choice. So it's just an illusion that we could have made any other decision. Why? Well, maybe this illusion is a method our brain uses to learn and make better decisions next time or whatever. You can't change the past, but to help yourself feel in control of it, there's the illusion that you could have chosen differently. We'll get back to the question of whether or not we actually have free will later, but let's talk about some of the usefulness when you believe in whether or not you have free will. As I said earlier, it feels like we're in control of our choices, and so it feels like we have free will. We feel tied to our thoughts. Whatever thought pops into my head is my own. That's myself, right? But That's just our ego, our sense of self taking credit for our environment. We can apply the same logic to other people. When someone does something we don't like, we believe they consciously chose to do whatever pissed us off. Emotions like hatred no longer make sense. We hate someone because they made a choice. But without free will, who are you going to be mad at? Similar to a tornado being a product of certain environmental conditions, people's decisions were a product of their environment. So, can we stop letting our ego take credit from our situation, and adversely, stop crediting other people for their situation? To be honest, this sounds very similar to the mindfulness people experience during meditation or ego death from taking a psychedelic. Okay, so on the other side, there's an argument for believing you have free will as well. One can imagine the helplessness you would feel if you weren't in control and ended up making a really bad decision. Helplessness or lack of control has been linked to depression. When people don't have a sense of control, they often feel depressed. So believing that you have free will is better for our mental health. It also acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's a thing called the law of attraction. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the belief that your mindset determines your next reality. By having a positive mindset, positive things are more likely going to happen to you. This is often taken to the extreme. Like, if I believe I'm rich, the law of attraction will work its magic and I'll become rich. This obviously goes completely against determinism. Our mind doesn't somehow control reality. It's a product of our reality. And yet somehow the mindset works for people. So, having a certain mindset acts as a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, and the feeling of being in control is better for our mental health. So overall, there's real value in believing we're in control. Two very different arguments, one in the belief you are in control and the other that nobody is. This is just speculation on my part, but it seems one of them tailors to your internals and the other to your externals. One is catering to our biology, making us feel in control and safe and happy. The other is focusing on our consciousness, our sense of self, or separating our ego from our externals. Okay, so free will or not, it doesn't change the fact that our hardware is capable of leading us towards many different outcomes. It may be true that having a positive mindset means it's more likely for positive things to happen, though whatever determined you to adopt that mindset isn't in your control. We have become so complex and capable of so many outcomes. Does that mean that what we have currently, because it's almost indistinguishable from free will, it's just as good? I don't know. Open question. So here's where I'm going to push back and try and argue that free will is just as part of the family as any legitimate child. So what I've been saying is everything is causally determined. This takes a classical mechanics approach to the question, but what about quantum mechanics? There's no determinism in there. Everything is a probabilistic event. See, classical mechanics is weird in this way. How can something deterministic or predictable emerge even though the underlying properties are non-deterministic? Following this type of thinking, it brings up the idea of cellular automata. The idea that from very simple rules, there can emerge complex structures or even living cells. Can one of these entities have such a thing as free will? Or does the system and rules they abide by mean that no such agent can have free will? I can't help but make the connection between this and Gödel's incompleteness theorem. From a system made from rules, all of which are proven to be true, you can get contradictory answers. So, from a system of determinism, can there emerge non-determinism? A system in which we know things are deterministic, but when they're all added together, they can produce something non-deterministic? This is taking a bottom-up approach. You start with determinism and build up from there into non-determinism. But we know reality isn't like this. If we look at the bottom-up approach of reality, we see it's the opposite of that. Quantum mechanics is non-deterministic, yet from that emerged classical mechanics. So that's a bust. Well, what if it stays non-deterministic all the way up? Ah, there we go. What does the brain look like in relation to this idea? Is the brain able to retain quantum coherence, gobbledygook in the wet, mushy? Roger Penrose has said that consciousness isn't a computation. He doesn't argue that it means we have free will, but if you're able to keep non-determinism as a function in the brain, then it could mean our choices either no longer have to be determined by our environment, or everything's already been predetermined in the Big Bang or something. All this to say, there may be a non-zero possibility that our consciousness may rely on quantum mechanics. Considering photosynthesis relies on quantum mechanics, and it's theorized that our sense of smell involves quantum tunneling, I don't think it's an impossibility. Giving this idea our best shot, let's say that we have little random number generators going on in your brain, similar to the non-determinism of a wave function collapse or whatever. Following this reasoning, your choices are now unpredictable and random, but just because your choice to go left or right is no longer determined anymore, still doesn't mean you're in control. Even if there were the equivalent to random number generators in our brain, how would that mean we're able to choose our next reality? Are you going to now make the argument that our consciousness through panpsychism and consciousness as a fundamental part of physics determines which reality we enter next, where consciousness plays a key role in reality? I can't get into that right now, the video's almost over. Anyway, it keeps coming back to control. The answer or decision could be randomized, but you as a person still don't control which decisions are presented to you. Just ask a person with schizophrenia or OCD. They're already painfully aware of how little control they have over their inner thoughts. While on the subject of quantum mechanics though, how about a many-worlds interpretation of free will? In the many-worlds theorem, every time a wave function collapses, the world splits in two, where both possibilities happen. Basically, every possible universe exists because both possibilities happen. So then, does a universe exist where it's true that a version of me has free will? Can such a thing be possible? To harken back to my question earlier with cellular automata, do we exist in a system where free will is possible? If what we are experiencing is an illusion of free will, does that mean free will is similar to our illusion, or could it be completely different? To end this off, I tried to imagine an entity with free will. I think a possible agent that fits all the boxes would be a brain in a vat. We have to do some playful mutilation to reality though. Something in line with Donald Hoffman's idea that the reality we experience isn't actually reality, it's only a very small sliver, and our brain acts as VR goggles rendering out the reality we perceive. So our current reality would exist in our brain. Following that reasoning, both realities are equally as real as each other because reality would be a product of the brain. The only difference is the brain in a vat has control over its reality, as though in a lucid dream. So I guess you could say, if you believe reality is a product of the brain, then maybe free will exists in your dreams. Bye bye.